We're going to call the meeting to order. We need to begin by a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Can one of you second?
I will second.
Thank you so much. There's only 4 of us, so this will be interesting.
Oh,
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right, we also need a motion to adopt or to approve the minutes from last meeting. I hope you had a chance to read them.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Seconded.
All right, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, chair votes aye as well. All right, so this is the opportunity for the public to comment on any public matter that is not on the agenda of the meeting and is within the jurisdiction of the Teachers Retirement Board. However, the board may not take action on any issues raised unless it's included on the agenda and public comment has been allowed. If issues are raised that would require board action, the issue would need to be included on the agenda for a future meeting. Public matter does not include disability applications, contested cases, or other adjudicative proceedings. We do have mostly staff and our friends from Kavanaugh McDonald, so. And we'll start with you guys today. You guys are our beginning, our actuarial valuation.
Can I real quickly? So Dee and Dan, do you want me to put the presentation up on the screen?
Yes, please.
Please.
All right, will do.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We're here to present the results of the July 1, 2023 actual evaluation. This presentation basically summarizes results, but it's kind of 2 parts or 2 pieces. One, the first few slides are educational, just going over what actuarial processes and those things, and then we'll get into the results. So let's get started. So the first slide here is, ask the question, it's like, why does my plan need an actuary? Most people don't even know what an actuary is. So but, basically we help plans, we develop strategies basically to help fund plans essentially. We're pretty critical. Number 2 step there is just measuring the assets and the liabilities of the plan to, the assets aren't as hard as the liability side, but that's mainly what we focus on. From that, typically, some plans we actually determine actual contributions. So your plan's a little different because it's fixed rate. So you have a normal cost component, and then the rest of your contribution goes to pay the unfunded liability. A lot of plans, and there's some plans now in this state that have switched to actuarial determined contribution. So we'll actually determine what that is based on the adopted funding policy. The other thing we do is we analyze experience. So we make a lot of assumptions in our work, and so we have to analyze whenever we make an assumption, but when reality happens, we know it's always going to be a little different. What is the impact on the plan, and then finally, not only do we're presenting actual report today, but we also report on long-term trends of the plan as well, because valuations are basically just snapshots in point in time, and we do like to feel like we know where the plan is headed long-term, so that way we could if we have to tell you that we think something needs to be changed in order to keep the plan healthy going forward. So so if we go to the next slide. So we call this the basic retirement funding formula. I think this summarizes kind of our role just in one little snapshot here. But on the left-hand side, you have your contributions and investment income. And on the right-hand side, you have your benefit payments and admin expenses. So you can see that little scale there. This has to be in balance. Like If it's not in balance, then something has to switch. So you either need to add more money or change the benefits. Our role as the actuary basically is to estimate the benefit side, because this is a defined benefit plan. So we don't know exactly what people's retirements our retirement benefits will be, and we don't even know exactly when people are going to retire. So we estimate their future benefit payment stream, and then on the left-hand side, we would what we do here is just determine, is that contribution side, is that adequate to fund the plan, basically. The other thing to point out here is that, depending how the markets are doing, 60 to 70% that gets paid out on that right-hand side actually comes from investment income. So this is a, it goes to show you that it pays to save, basically. You can think of another famous retirement plan, Social Security. There really is no I, so it's just contributions, and then if there's a mismatch there, something has to be done like immediately. So if we go to the next slide, the benefits, what determines that? Well, the plan provisions and the actual experience of the plan. And then what determines C, or what C depends on? Well, in the short term, it really just depends on our actuarial assumptions and methodologies that we use. But in the long term, it's really just a balancing item from all the other items there. So if we go to the next slide. So as I mentioned before, as part of our job is we have to make a lot of assumptions about behavior, and such things as disability, retirement, death. And if we go to the next slide, you see this slide here goes over, we talk about what we call like demographic assumptions, so people's behavior and how long they're going to live. And then if we go to the next slide, these are more on the economic side, so salary increases and discount rates. So your salary increases are very important because this is our final average pay plan. And so we need to project out salaries in order to do that. Higher salaries mean higher costs, essentially. And then the discount rate, that's the interest rate that we use to discount the liabilities back, or the benefit payments back, to come up with the liability. The method that we use here is that we use the expected return on the assets that are backing the plan. In the private sector, they actually have to use a bond rate. So, and it's whatever the market bond rate is at that time. So, and it really has nothing to do with the assets of the plan. Go to the next slide. Just commentary on, on these individual assumptions. If you change them, what does that do to your liabilities, basically? So turnover, that's terminating before retirement. Higher termination rates typically will lead to lower costs, because that should be, but what happens is you have less people getting retirement benefits, essentially. The other, mortality, that's, if you increase or decrease mortality, meaning you're improving life expectancy, that's going to increase costs, because you have to pay the benefit for the life of the members. So the longer people live, that will increase your costs. And then the discount rate, if you lower the discount rate, that increases the liabilities. So if you go down from 7.3, say, to 7 or something lower, that's going to increase the liabilities of the plan and impact the amortization period, essentially.
Hey, this is Dan Chamberlain here. May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Under the salary increase, that would also imply a proportional increase in contributions. So is it completely accurate to make the assumption that it would also increase the total liabilities?
It does increase the actual liabilities of the plan, because the future benefits are now higher. The benefit payments will be higher. It does help us because now we have more money coming in. So the amortization period may not always increase with higher pay, but the actual liabilities would.
Right, the liability number itself, but given the fact that there's also a proportional increase in the contributions, I'm wondering if the mathematical formula remains constant in terms of the annuitization assumption, regardless of salary increases.
You're kind of stumping me with the question here.
It's gonna be very dependent on the plan. So let's say you were 100% funded, right? So you had no unfunded liability. If you increased salaries, your liabilities are gonna go up. Your assets don't change, so it's gonna increase your funding period, right? Because now we have an unfunded liability. And it depends also on which members. So if all the salary increases go to a lower service, younger member where they don't have a lot of liability, the liabilities may not increase all that much. If the salary increases are for older members, higher service, higher pay, they have a bigger portion of the liability, that will increase the liability as well. So it's hard to say. Generally, I think it's an increase in liabilities when pay goes up, just because the benefits are higher. But there's a lot of other factors that go into the salary increases, and the total payroll and the money coming in from members and things like that.
Yeah, I would say there's nothing offsetting that liability. I mean, you have higher contributions coming in, but it's not. But actually, that depends on the pool of people. So if your head counts go down and your salaries go up, that would not be a good, that would actually increase your amortization period.
Mm-hmm. I guess the point I'm trying to get at is that with salary increases, and we have a proportional increase in contributions as well, and also the expectation of assumptions on growth that we continue to put into the system, it seems to me from that math that salary increases are probably a minor concern in terms of increasing the amortization assumption itself.
I mean, it's not a major concern because there is that offset there, but it does add to the unfunded liability. So.
Yep. Okay. I think I've made my point sufficiently clear. We're good. Go ahead.
Okay. And then the next slide is the last slide that I'm going to do. This is what the actual evaluation process looks for everybody that we go through. So for an active person, we actually run them through our computer programs to calculate the liabilities. And so you see why somebody's working. In this example, this person has 10 years of service, so that 10 years of service would go into the plan's accrued liability. That 20 years, if they haven't worked yet, is your future normal cost. So, but we project everybody out to retirement date, and then from there we estimate how long they're going to live and come up with the, there's a budgeting process or actual cost method process that comes up with the accrued liability for an active person. If we were looking at just a retiree, we would already know their retirement date, and we would just be projecting out how long they're going to live. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Okay. So, yeah, since we only get to see you once a year, I figured a little bit of background is always nice to have. But we'll get into the actual results of the plan now. Reminder, Todd mentioned it, this is a snapshot date. So as of all the assets, all the liabilities are as of July 1st, 2023. We do this once a year. It's just kind of a checkup on the plan to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. If we looked at things today, it would be different than the valuation. If we looked at things tomorrow, Monday, it would be different as well. So this is just a snapshot as July 1 of this year. So what changed from last year to this year? There was a few changes with the actual standards of practice. The revised ASOP 4 required us to put in some disclosures into the valuation report. We mentioned these a little bit last year, if anybody remembers, but one of them is a low default risk obligation measure. It's essentially a number using a lower discount rate that needs to be in the report. It doesn't change anything, it's just a disclosure that needs to be in there for actual standards. We have to report a required or a reasonable actual determined contribution. Some plans, what they're putting in is reasonable. Yours is right there, right borderline. We put in another number That's a 20-year closed amortization period with another rate. Again, this doesn't change anything that the system needs to do. It's just some actual disclosures. So no impact on the valuation, just kind of, there's some additional numbers in there that are required.
May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
With that new ASOP disclosure, what prompted that? Was that something that came from what?
That came from, so the actuarial standards of practice are written, unfortunately, by various types of actuaries. So insurance actuaries, private sector defined benefit actuaries, and very little input from public sector practice actuaries. So unfortunately, I think that those actuaries love numbers, and they also love bond rates and tying things to bond rates. And so that's what this LD-ROM is. It's basically a measure on a date based on the market, the market cost. So what's not good about that number is that it can change from year to year. So, and that can make that liability fluctuate tremendously. And, we've seen that in the, we don't work on private sector plans, but the discount rates to measure those went from 3% to 5% basically in 1 year, which basically reduced the liabilities of those plans for no other reason but the bond rate, the bond market changed. So, I don't particularly like putting this number in here because now it's another number and you have to, what does it mean? What number do we look at? It's, but a lot of actuaries love 100 numbers, and if you look at some of our competitors, the way they're disclosing these liabilities, I think it'd be very confusing to the reader because you get to it and they're showing contribution rates and all kinds of things based on it. So, and the only requirement is to actually disclose the number, and that's it. So, and that's all we've done in our report, and we put it in the risk section, and basically we kind of describe it as, that's the money that's being saved by, prudent investment, essentially, and, taking on adequate risk.
Is it like a 30-year treasury? What are they using?
It's the
30-year spot rate.
we use a city, it's, look in here. It's it's called the FTSE pension discount curve, and it's not just one rate, it's actually a series of rates. So
That's on page 33 of the valuation, of the full valuation.
So basically what you're saying then is that it's aimed more at the private sector than it is the public sector, but we still have to disclose it.
yes, we have to disclose this. Unfortunately, I think it's aimed at the public sector by a set of actuaries that don't work in the public sector, essentially. And we have to disclose it because we have to defend ourselves against other actuaries. Okay? We could be brought up to the ABCD board, because if somebody didn't think our work was reasonable, or essentially. So, so we have to disclose it, but it is actually aimed at the public sector by the private sector and insurance actuaries, essentially.
All right. Thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one. So a couple things on the valuation for this year. First, look at the asset return. So market value or market return, we're actually about 8.3%. Assumed rate of return was 7.3, so we were 1% higher than what our assumed rate of return was. Just as kind of a note here, the 8.3 might be slightly different than you see from the BOI. This excludes admin expenses, and then our timing is just assumes mid-year, so we don't have the exact timing as well. So there might be a slight difference with that, but on average, or right about 1% above assumed. That's a market value. Remember, we use an actuarial value of assets or a smooth value of assets because, again, it'd be too volatile for using the market value every year. And so when we use that smooth value over 4 years, it actually was a 7.66% return. So again, above that 7.3, and so we had an actuarial gain. More money came in than we expected, which is good. We currently have a deferred loss. So again, this means that we have, the market value is about $51 million less than the actuarial value. So even if we earn 7.3% exactly for forever going forward, we're gonna have this $51 million that needs to flow through our smoothing method that's gonna be recognized. And when we say a 4-year smoothing period, it's not, all right, we have $51 million of deferred loss, we're gonna divide that by 4 and recognize it each year. Every year we have a gain or a loss, and that's gonna be recognized over 4 years. And so we had one 4 years ago gets recognized, the following year is a different 4-year period. And so that's kind of what we see down at the bottom. The expected investment gain in 2024, if all assumptions are met, would be $72 million gain. But then the following year, we have a big gain that drops off, so 2025 investment loss of $134 million. And so that's kind of how the smoothing works through. All right, let's go to the next one. The funded ratio did increase about 71.73 up to about 72.5%, so that's good. And then the amortization period again came down one year from the 25 to the 24, so that's kind of good. Not much going on as we expected, so good to see that coming down. Go to the next one. So Todd kind of talked about the membership that we have, all these assumptions we need to use, but we need to know the members in the plan, the people that are going to be due a benefit in the future or currently due a benefit. So here we look at the active membership and the retired members, the members that are currently in pay, kind of a historical graph of this. So the active membership, we got just under 20,000 active members, and that's been pretty stable this past year, and kind of going back to 2008, which is nice to have. The retirees, you see, we're doing what we're expected to do, right? We're paying out more benefits. We're giving these benefits to these employees that have worked for the system. And so the retirees were up to about 18,000, and that's expected to increase. That's kind of where our headcounts are at. Go to the next one. Look at the average salaries and benefits of these members. So the average salary for active members, just under 60,000, 59,667 for them. So about a 1.9% increase from last year. And then the average benefits continued to increase as well, just over 25,000 for the average benefits of an in-pay member. Again, a 1.6% increase from last year. And again, when they're based on pay, as pay increases, our benefits are expected to increase similarly. Go to the next one. Total payroll and total benefits, again, kind of historical graph of those. The top one is our total payroll. This is that total payroll that we're expected to grow about 3.25% per year, our payroll growth assumption. It actually went up about 2.2% this past year. So we're up to 824 million of total payroll in the system. And then the green line down at the bottom is the number of benefit payments that we're paying out each year. So about 446 million. Again, continues to increase, but that's why we're funding the plan to be able to pay these benefits.
Yeah, just to point out, this is full-time payroll. It doesn't include part-time payroll. So there's actually, it's almost $1 billion in total payroll. So.
Okay. The next one. So looking at the assets here, what you see, the blue bars coming up, or blue columns coming up, is the market value of assets going back from 2008 to 2023. And then the red line coming across is the actuarial value of assets, or the smooth value. And as we'd expect with a good smoothing method, that red line is going to be sometimes above, sometimes below the market value. The blue lines, the blue columns are a little bit more volatile because the market value is, right, as we've seen in the past, even the last couple years, right, a 27% return and then a negative 4% return, 2.3, so it kind of bounces around. And we'd see our amortization period bounce around as well if we were using that, but that's why we use the smoothing method, the red line in here.
Yeah, just to point out, this is just a smoothing method. If you earn the assumed rate of return for the next 3 years in a row, they would be equal. And there would be no, so it's really just to reduce volatility in the answer at the end of the day. And a lot of times it's actually to reduce volatility in the positive direction, because we know that positive is usually followed by bad return. So, in a system where you're actually determining an actual contribution, you don't want that contribution rate to drop and then all of a sudden have to go back up, and then the employer has budgeted that money away already, and then it becomes a problem for not only the people who have to pay the bill, but also for the plan, because now they might not get their required contribution. So.
Okay, go to the next one. Get into the meat of the results here, all the numbers. So the funding results here, left column we have the last year's, and then the right column is the 2023 results. So the top row here, the normal cost rate, again, this is the ongoing cost of the plan, the cost to fund the benefits for active members. So we're at 10.75% of pay. Members put in 8.15% of their pay, and so that difference is what goes to the system needs to pay for those ongoing benefits, 2.6% of payroll. The total employer contribution rate, 11.96, came up from the 11.86 last year, and that was a scheduled increase, the 0.1% each year. And I think this is actually the last step of that increase now, so we're now done with that. But when you take the difference between those two, our total rate that we're putting in, the normal cost, whatever's left over, or that 9.36% of pay, that's what goes to fund our unfunded liability, to pay down that debt. And if you look down below here, the debt, or that unfunded actual accrued liability, the 1.886 million or 1.9 billion of liability is just the difference between our smooth value of assets and our actuarial liability. When Todd was talking discounting back those benefit payments, that's what the liability is. So just under 7 billion in liability, about 5 billion in assets. Divide those two, you get that 72.49% funded ratio. And if we continue to pay that 9.36% towards the unfunded liability, we're expecting 24 years to fully amortize that, to pay down all that debt. Okay. And the last one here, next slide. This just shows the gains and losses on what actually happened during the prior year. So we always say if all assumptions are met, they never are, and this kind of shows when those assumptions aren't met. So the bars coming to the right were actuarial losses, the bars going to the left were actuarial gains. A couple of the bigger ones, the green one coming out there, those were retirements. So we had earlier retirements than expected. Somebody retires earlier, we're going to pay them more in benefits. It's an actuarial loss, and so that was 27 million in a loss. Down at the very bottom, the investment income, that was, again, that 7.66% return on the smooth value above the 7.3, that's a gain. And so we had 17 million in gain. So that's kind of how these work out. You hope to have gains and losses that offset each other altogether. And total, it was about $11 million actuarial loss, which is, in our book, pretty good, 0.2% actuarial liability. So really small in total. So with that, see if there's any questions.
You said, we never hit everything precisely, but if we're pretty close, every year, our amortization period should go down 1 year. Is that fair to say?
If all the assumptions are met, yes, but it's more likely to go, this year it happened to go down by 1, but it's more likely to go down by more than 1, or more likely to increase by more than 1, or, yeah, it's kind of, it fluctuates. When you're we're at 24 years, that's very sensitive, so the smallest change can make that 23, or the smallest change can make that 27.
It's more sensitive the higher it is, or?
Yeah, yes, so, like, the difference between 30 and, say, infinity is not much, when you do that calculation, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if we're down to like 2 years, to be able to cut it down to 0, you're wiping everything out. It's, instead of going 1 year, you're doubling it, right? If you're up at a 50-year amortization, moving 1 year is a smaller percentage of that 50 years. So yeah, so it does get more volatile as the higher. But you're right, if all assumptions are met, they should continue to decrease by 1.
Yeah, I mean, the first 7 or 8 years I was here, we did that.
Yeah.
And then we made a couple changes and it went right back up.
Yeah, experience studies kind of throw wrenches in there, but, assumption-wise, you couldn't be in a better shape right now because we're using generational mortality And the only other thing, discount rates, and, how they are volatile, but, capital market assumptions this year are actually going up quite a bit. So, so we'll see where that lands, the next experience study, basically. But,
Thank you guys very much. Do we have any questions for our actuaries as they're sitting here at the table? All good news. I mean, I always like to see the numbers going down, so.
So the page 33, is that the actual disclosure?
yes, it's in that
Okay.
paragraph.
It's in that paragraph, so it looks like it's not really highlighted.
It's just-
If that's fair to say.
What are you trying to say?
I didn't, what was the rate? I mean, what was that 30-year rate? I'm just curious.
Unfortunately, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it's a yield curve, so it's not just one rate. So, it's probably close to like 5%.
How do you use a curve?
So
to
our
discount that?
software allows us to put it in, reach the duration for, the year, just plug it in. So any cash flow that's being like, that's, 2 years out will be discounted at one rate. Cash flows that are 30 years out will be discounted at a different rate. So, typical yield curve kind of looks like this, you have
Yeah.
higher rates at the end.
Right now it's upside down.
Yeah, it's upside down, but, yeah, so that's kind of how it
Okay,
works.
well, that's interesting.
So that's disclosed there, and then the reasonable actuarial determined contributions actually is on page 3, the disclosure.
Page 3.
Yep. And then, where's the, I guess, can you point us to the contribution allocation procedure? Where's that at? Where do you disclose
Well,
that?
that's the same,
Is it
the
the,
same one, yeah.
Yeah. It's really just your funding policy.
okay.
And we do, I do projections just internally, so I know what we're, and the plan looks pretty good from a projection standpoint, as long as the assumptions are met, basically. And the one I did, it doesn't even have the payroll growing at 3.25%, and it's still, you have a nice steady climb in your funded ratio, so. So from that standpoint, so your current allocation procedure, meaning the fixed rate, is working, so, and we even say that in there too, so.
Cool.
Thank you.
Dee or Dan Chamberlain, do you, either of you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
And we don't have a lot of public, so I'm assuming.
Rebecca Power
Oh.
from Legislative Services Division is online. I don't know if she has.
Rebecca, would you like to comment?
Madam Chair, I don't have any comment, but thank you for recognizing me.
Thank you. All right, guys, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Heading back today?
Actually, we're going down NCTR, so we're leaving.
Oh, you are.
to
We will
San
see you
Diego. Yeah, we'll see you there.
All right, safe travels.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, Brian's actually, he's on an actuarial panel.
Oh, good.
So you're sticking around until Tuesday.
I am.
We put the discount rate in there.
I'll be back, so can't wait.
And I get to introduce a magician, so.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun.
You're gonna do your trick, right?
I'm thinking about it.
All right, we need a motion to adopt the actuarial valuation results that we just heard. It's been moved. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of adopting the actuarial valuation results indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Dee, I think you're on mute.
I said aye, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And chair votes aye as well. The motion is passed. Thank you. All right. Appreciate it, guys. We'll see you there.
Yeah.
All right, see you there.
So now we're on to administrative business. And we're gonna start with Dan on our investment
Yeah, so I'm meeting with the Board of Investments next week, but we did meet at the end of August and had a really good discussion, I think, from our consultants at RBK. Obviously, the end of the fiscal year was pretty good timing, and we had a nice result, and things have gotten a little bit worse here the last few weeks. So I don't know what it'll look like at the end of the next month or quarter. A couple of things that RBK talked about, and this has changed again in the last couple of weeks, but US equities are near the upper limit of their normal valuations relative to earnings in the top 10% historically. So the expectation of US equities outperforming their historical norms is probably, we probably shouldn't expect that. US equities are going to be probably a little bit tough, and we're seeing a little bit of that right now. International, the difference between the two, the spread between the price earnings ratio for US and international is the biggest it's ever been. So international looks more attractive, and we've kind of moved a little bit of money in that direction. This year, the S&P, while it looked like a really good return, that was 7 stocks. If you took out those 7 stocks, it didn't look very good at all. And that's mostly about this idea that AI is going to save the world and which companies are involved in that. So that was something to keep in mind too, is that the breadth of what's going on is just not there. Fixed income down again, and here we are even beyond that, down further. I think the 10-year treasury is now at a 20-year high. So in the short run, that's painful because you own bonds and those bonds decline in value. In the long run, that might be good for us if we can have risk-free returns that are somewhere near our actuarial hurdle. Then we'll probably move in that direction a little bit. I think our bond guys did move out the yield curve a little bit. And I bet you right now they're kind of wishing they didn't, because rates moved up another 40 basis points or something. But ultimately, I think it'll be good to have risk-free returns that are higher. And I'm hoping that rates stay a little bit higher. That maybe they don't need to be this high, but I hope they stay higher than what we experienced the last 15 years, which was really, really hard to make any money in fixed income. Yield curve is still inverted. That means that markets expect rates to come down. I think markets are, at least in the last few weeks, are thinking, well, maybe that's going to take longer than we thought. That's part of what's going on with stocks and bonds right now. Economy's slowing. If there's a lag between what the Fed does and what occurs, but we're starting to see some indicators that look like things are slowing down. So that's good. We got to hit the sweet spot. We need it to slow down enough to reduce inflation down to the Fed's target. But if it slows down too much, then we're going to be worried that we're going to have a recession that's uncomfortable, and that's going to drive equity prices down too. So we got to hit that sweet spot. We think there's still a chance we can get there. And if there is a recession, it should be fairly mild. It doesn't mean market reaction will be mild, but there's a shortage of labor. Demand seems to still be there. There's a shortage of housing. So it doesn't look like the ingredients for a really ugly recession. We do think real estate, especially in commercial and especially in office and especially in B office space, there's still more down to go there. Right now, there's really no activity in commercial real estate because buyers are still here with their price, sellers are still here with their prices and buyers are here. And so nothing's happening. What will force action is when the banknote comes due, then they'll come back together. And the idea is that probably prices will come down a little bit. So not in an environment where we're super excited about anything, unfortunately. Might be a little bit rough going forward, but we're long-term investors, so we're gonna be fine.
Very informational, thank you. I think you gave it to us in the terms I really understood this kind of stuff, thank you. Anything for Dan?
Nope, that was good, very good analysis.
All right. Nolan, then we're on to you for financial statements and budget reports.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board. So we're looking at page 40 of your packet and start on the balance sheet. And these are as of August 31st, 2023 in comparison to August 31st of 22. So basically, I mean, I think if we looked at these as of September, these wouldn't look as good, but, I think July and August, we're actually still, hovering above water there. So I think, you'll see like the total investments are up in comparison to last year, about $70 million in, total assets, in this similar range. There's not much more to point out here on the balance sheet. Our liabilities are very similar to where they were at this point last year, unless there's any questions. You'll see the year-to-date is, less than what we saw last year, but still, in the positive range. On page 41, the fund balance shows that revenue over expenses of $36 million. So it's still, in the black for, at least as of August 31st. I don't know if it would be the same if you looked at it more current. Any questions on any of the fund balance or balance sheet?
It would not be the same.
Yeah.
It's safe to say, right?
The last page is kind of just your investment by, revenue by sources and investment revenue by sources, and then your admin expenses. So our admin expenses look real similar to, last year. You can see our personal services are up, and that mostly has to do with the 4% or 50-cent raise, which, I guess actually equated to anywhere from 4 to about 9%, depending on the employee. But our contracted services are down, and that's probably just a timing issue of some certain bills or invoices. Our amortization expense is down, and I think we fully amortize our M-Trust Phase 2. So basically all of the M-Trust project will be fully amortized here this fiscal year, and then we still have some ongoing expenses, but we expense those in the current year, and we budget for those, and so they're not going to be amortized or anything like that. So any questions on any of the financials? Budget is, obviously we're only 2 months here into the fiscal year for the budget, so it's extremely hard to project. We do the best we can, but, it looks like we're gonna have at least a small surplus in personal services. And then in operating, we usually end up with some budget surplus, but, there is unexpected expenses that may come up that will eat into that surplus, so. And the last 2 pages there are just the contracted services, which is our largest category. And, we haven't spent, we spent about 6%, and we're about 17% through the fiscal year. So, again, just too early to tell what's going on there, really. And we do have a couple delinquent agencies that I'm working with, a couple school districts that we need to, and I've been in contact with the superintendents and the payroll clerks and things, so.
So the only thing I guess I'll point out while we're on this page is currently we're overspent in medical services, and I already know it's even more than that, and that's just as a result of having our contract physician review some pretty complicated disability requests. So I think that 3,900 doesn't include the bill we just got, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, just that person who does those reviews, we got a bill that was from a lot of work in the previous fiscal year, so we paid for it in this fiscal year, even though, so that was part of that 3,900.
Yeah, I guess the point I
Yeah.
would make is, so, I mean, by the time we look at this again, it'll be over 8,000 and it's gonna be, 500% overspent. But I mean, it's so hit or miss. I mean, we've gone many years where we don't even come close to spending the 1,500. It just depends on the complexity of the disability reviews that we're doing. And as you well know, I mean, one of them's been in front of you at the last meeting, and we're gonna look at it again today. It's pretty complicated. It takes some time.
That's 0.3% of our budget.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even worried that we're gonna overspend our contracted services. It's gonna look like a crazy percentage over, and the reason is the complexity.
And those stand out to other people too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those reviews are important because they drive decision-making on whether you approve or disapprove the request.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have unless there's any other questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, just looking at tentative meeting dates. I always like to look at the next one, the December 1st. That is not working for me right now. We'll be gone, but I also know that I could jump on like this. So I wanted to talk about the December 1st one. I know it's not right there, but it's the next meeting date. We need that as well.
Let's change it.
Yeah, that next Friday would work great for me, but I think that's the 8th.
Yeah, that's the 8th. It's the mining seat duels.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll be so anything from the 8th to February 10th
Is crazy.
is tough, but I mean, I can do whatever we need to do. I mean, I have assistant coaches too.
Is there a non-Friday that could work for you?
Yeah, and well, that, it could, yes. I could come down on like the November 30th.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly won't affect me at all, the 30th, but how about Dan and Dee?
Dan and Dee, we're still just 4 of us, so it is kind of important that we're here. Or we don't really even have a.
The 30th is fine for me.
And me as well.
I just don't want to be acting chair, so you have to come.
We have elections today, maybe you're.
Yes. All right, okay, we'll make that the 30th work then.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then, let's see where we at here. Sorry, I need to put my glasses back on. Public comment. Rebecca?
Nope, thank you.
All right. And let's see. Oh, we've got a request for public information records and our fees policy.
So, Madam Chair, we have the policy in your packet. Unfortunately, let me flip to that page, because I have some notes written
45.
down. Just last Friday, Denise and I sat in on some D of A training, I guess for lack of a better word, on their policy that is going to be coming out in the next month. And I guess our recommendation at this point is we're gonna have to change our policy so much. I mean, not that it's that much different, just the language needs to change to align with their policy, that if we recommend at this point that we table this action item and we'll bring it forward in December. And we may end up at a point where our policy is to adopt the DMA policy, really,
Okay.
to be honest with you. But we didn't know that when I put the packet together. We just got that information last Friday. Would you have anything to add to that? I mean,
No,
it's
that's
a summary.
exactly right, yeah.
Should we move then to table this to a later time, and it still was an action item?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think so,
I
yes.
think so.
So moved.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
So moved and seconded to table this, this request for public information's records. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye as well. Motion passes. And we also have on our action items here, a request for a budget amendment.
Yes. Do you want me to walk you
Yeah,
through this?
you would walk us through.
All right, so Madam Chair, members of the board, in your packet, both online and, in print, I put a section in here with some detail about the budget amendment we're requesting, and this is a result of the strategic planning session in August where it became evident that the board was supportive of adding another communications person to our staff. And so there's two pieces of this amendment. The first one is we're requesting, an additional FTE and $51,521 in salary and benefits for that person to get us through the remainder of this fiscal year. And that would be at a public relations specialist number 1. And I don't know if you had a chance to review the materials, but I did provide in here, I can scroll down, the pay ranges for specialist 1. Specialist 2 is what our current communications manager is classified as. And then the pay range for the public relations supervisor is there. And then I also included the occupational standard. So just to explain the standard real quickly, all of the boxes up here are what a public relations specialist 1 would be expected to be able to do. And then a public relations specialist 2 would be able to do all of those boxes above plus the boxes in the specialist 2 column. And then the supervisor would have the additional supervisor manage and then perform management functions, including hiring, firing, performance management, etc. So those are the standards. Darla and I worked with our Department of Administration HR partner, and we think that specialist 1, it was their recommendation, and we agreed that we think the specialist 1 is the appropriate level for the additional FT we're asking for. And the second part of the request is to authorize pay increase because this person will report directly to Darla. She'll be responsible for all of the performance management functions of that position, as well as guiding their work, workflow, and checking the work for accuracy and quality and so on and so forth. Part of that, I'm going to actually put it in as a reclassification to classify her as a supervisor. That will require a desk audit by D of A. I should go through as requested because she will be clearly supervising that position. But if it's not, I don't think we have to do this budget amendment in a way that changes the additional pay. I mean, the additional pay could be tacked onto her current classification, and she would still only be about 95% of market anyway. So that's the explanation. I'm happy to ask any questions. Again, these are all calculated to get us from, say, middle of November to the end of the fiscal year. And then next year, obviously, we would be looking at an annualized cost for a whole year for the both FTE and the pay increase. So the grand total of both items is this 55,062.
Sean, I have a question. Is this salary going to attract a person that actually will stay with us for a while?
So, Madam Chair and Member Brown, I believe so. I mean, I think that, we're offering 95% of the market for, if this is what you approve for this position. And we only have ever had experience with one other communications FTE, and we've had, really good luck with Darla staying in her position. So I think it will be. With that said, I mean, it's been a lot different in the last 12 to 18 months for recruiting any position. I mean, some polls we have a pretty good turnout, and then some other polls we have very few, but it seems like those are the lower paying positions, and I think this one should be at a level where we should have decent, applicants, I believe, but I won't know that for sure until we get it out there.
Right. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Director Graham, I have one minor comment to make. Under the Public Relations Supervisor request there at the bottom of the dialogue, we might want to include a decimal there. It looks a little confusing with that salary raise. And beyond that, I have a motion to make. I move approval of the sorry?
Oh, sorry, I guess I don't see where you're
Right
looking.
at the bottom.
Yeah, request is 5,770,000. Yeah. You might want to put a decimal there.
I was gonna sneak mine in there too.
Okay.
I have a quick question, Dan, maybe before your motion, and it may not matter, but if the state looks at this to approve it, under that public relations supervisor, it says supervisor manage at least 2 FTE.
Correct, but I've talked to our HR partner and they will come and do a desk audit, and, you know, they don't like to do it for only 1 FTE, but they do it.
Okay.
So I think it'll be very clear that Darla would be guiding this person's work. She'll be doing all the mid-year and the end-of-year performance evaluations. I don't think we'll have any trouble with it, but
Okay.
in the event we do, I think the way that you're going to pass this will be fine either way.
So Dan Chamberlain, you have an motion.
I move approval of the fiscal year 2024 budget amendment as drafted to hire an additional communications FTE and to increase the salary of our existing communications manager. The fiscal year 24 increase in budget authority is $55,062.62.
Second.
I moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 And chair votes aye as well. Motion passes. So our next meeting date is going to be that November 30th. And we're moving on to the executive director's report. I'm going to let Sean take over from there.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, there's not a lot to report on other than a couple things. First of which is that our active benefit staff, with assistance from our communications manager, have set up and they've already started attending some of their Ready, Set, Retire presentations. I have listed there the locations that they're doing those presentations this fall. So they've already been to Eureka and Whitefish last week. This week, Jessie Hill is in Wolf Point and Havre. I guess she just got back today, or is getting back today. Next week, we're doing Dillon and Butte, and then the final one for in-person presentations will be at the annual conference, October 19th and 20th in Billings. And then I did not write these down, but Darla can maybe let me know if she remembers off the top of her head. We are scheduling a couple of webinars, and we will post that on our website here very soon. We didn't want to get those webinar dates out until after most of the in-person ones are completed, just so that we can, you know, hopefully have more people show up in person, since we're making the effort and going out into the field. But do you remember the dates on those, Darla?
Yes, November 9th for Ready, Set, Retire, and December 6th, and then we're gonna do a TRS 101 on November 14th.
Okay, so November 9th, December 6th for Ready, Set, Retire, and then 101 on, what was it, December?
November 14th.
November 14th, yeah.
Okay.
So far, we may add.
Yeah. Beyond that, we were able to fill the vacant imaging tech position that we had at TRS. Robert Grodsky was hired on August 14th, and he's been getting up to speed in our imaging department and doing just fine in that role. So at the moment, we are currently staffed, and until we go advertise the position you just approved.
Kind of exciting.
Yeah. Next, legislative interim committee update. There hasn't been a lot happen yet, but there's plenty to come. The State Administration and Veteran Affairs Committee met on the 11th of September. They adopted their work plan. The SJ4 pension study was one of the items that they're going to devote a fair amount of their time and effort on over the interim, which was expected. I believe I'm scheduled to present the results of our evaluation to SAVA at their November 8th meeting, according to their tentative agenda. The Legislative Finance Committee, as part of the SJ4 pension study, had to appoint 4 members to serve on that committee, and the members that they appointed were Senator Tom McGilvery, Representative Eric Matthews, Representative Jim Hamilton, and Representative Terry Moore. As of right now, I'm not entirely sure if the SJ4 pension study will include the entire SAVA committee, or if SAVA is planning to also appoint a subset. But at a minimum, we'll have those 4 LFC members, and then I guess to be determined on how many SAVA members. I see Ms. Powers is online. She may have more information on that than I do. With that, that's the executive director's update.
Be a great time, Rebecca, for you to, this is public comment, so that would help.
Yes,
You know.
Madam Chair, so it will be the 4 LFC members and then the entire SAVA committee will participate in the study. We'll do sort of a soft launch during the November meeting. And then, so all 4 LFC members will hopefully be able to attend that. And then we will begin in earnest at our January meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Any other public comment? All right, well, seeing none, it looks as though we are quite a bit ahead of our schedule, and I think that the next item, it was our break, and then we had something that looks like someone was going to be here for, so we don't want to do that.
Yes.
Is there anything we could pull forward?
We could pull the internal auditor report forward. I think Chris is in the room. And then, we're kind of stuck on the strategic plan. I can text Jim, email Jim and see if he can hear.
Yeah, all right.
We could do the applications and benefit adjustments, and I don't know about your report as
Okay.
well, possibly.
Yeah, I mean,
time.
it's always good to be ahead, but
Sure.
I can sit around and wait for a few
So we
minutes.
could do
You know, just visit.
item 8 and item 9, I think we can do now.
Okay.
Well, that's,
Or not 8, I'm
7.
sorry. 7.
Seven.
Yeah, 7
and 9.
and 9, yep.
All right, well, let's do 7. Come on up.
That's-
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Chris Fish, the internal and external auditor. Just completed my first year in this position. I went through 16 audits. It started, the first couple months, I was just trying to figure out, how I'm gonna, go through the process and come up with some templates and all of that. So what I came up with is, I asked the school districts for several items before I start their audit. I get a full worker roster, their names, job titles, all extracurricular duties that they perform. Then I ask for their complete payroll report from their software, timesheets that their hourly employees fill out, so I can make sure that what's on their timesheets matches what was entered into the system. Then I'll get some either I-9s, W-4s, if they still have their employees fill out membership forms, and that's just to verify dates of birth and social security numbers, and a lot of times name changes that we would need to make in our system. And then I ask for the list of all of their independent contractors, mostly for working retirees, to make sure that they're being reported to the retirement system, their wages. And as I go through all of these reports, then I usually do have several other documents that I will request, job descriptions, stuff like that. So then what I do before I start, the actual audit, I contact the employer, I'll call them, send an email, just say this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'll be completing. And I ask them what payroll software they use, just so I can know what kind of report to look for. And then I mail them an engagement letter, and I put this in the mail with all of the steps, all the documents that I'm requesting, why I'm doing this report, and I explain in there that it's mostly for retirees, just to make their retirement go more smoothly, so we don't have to fix any errors 10 years down the road. We can get their service credit, all of that fixed now, and then hopefully it will help. Then the active payroll won't have to go through and do all of this when they go to retire. Then right before, and I have a calendar set up for each of my audits. So a week before, I'll email, ask if there's any questions on what I'm requesting, and then I will give them a call if I haven't heard back from them, just make sure. And I haven't had any issues with getting the reports, the initial reports on time. And then what I do is I'll just go through the reports. I start usually with just the job titles and stuff, just make sure that who should be reported to us is being reported, and then I just go from there with the payroll. And I do go through every single employee and make sure what should be reported is being reported, what shouldn't be isn't. And I was very surprised at what I found in just 1 year with just the 16 schools. I'm still working on the OPI one. I'm still waiting for some information from them. So that, what I do is, I'll write down, I'll take notes and everything, and then I create a spreadsheet and send the clerk a list of all of the issues that I found or any more information I need. And they'll get that back to me, and that's when I will create spreadsheets to send to active payroll for service and salary not reported, so that they can get that part, the buybacks and fixing the service credits and all of that, reported an error to the PERS. I only had a couple of those issues this year, reported an error to PERS, and that should have been us. I think it was 2 aid positions. But the salary and service not reported, the majority of what I found were substitutes that exceeded the 210-hour limit or were already members of the retirement system that worked at different schools, and the school that they're subbing at now didn't know. Oh, yeah. So that is where I found the most, that the salaries and service were not reported. Another thing I found a lot of were coaching stipends. One school hadn't been reporting coaching stipends for a long time. Thank goodness most of them were full-time teachers, so it didn't affect the service credit. It was just salary not reported. So there was, the total salary not reported, as you can see there, was over $473,000 of salary that wasn't reported. And then just the estimated contributions, we used the 19.91%. So just the estimated contributions that were owed to TRS was, $94,299.99. So that's quite a bit of contributions that weren't reported to the retirement system that should have been.
So the employees have to come up with that, and the school district, right?
Well,
or how we doing that?
2016 on, it's the school district pays both the employee and employer contributions.
Okay,
So
that's good.
yeah.
Okay, I was
If it
thinking,
was-
oh,
yeah.
we're not popular right now.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I think this points out the need for the auditor. I think she just paid for herself in this report.
Yes, she did.
it's shocking, really.
I know. That was my first comment, at least, at least it covered my salary. So there was only one school that had 2 employees, and it went back several years, that they were paying, two aid positions to the PERS employer, PERS retirement system instead of ours. So that was, Active Payroll did, reported an error for those 2 members. And that was reported an error to TRS, I'm sorry. So they were, I'm sorry, I'm all confused now. So yes, there were 2 employees that were reported to PERS instead of teachers like they should have been. Reported an error to TRS. So the ones that were reported to us that shouldn't have been, it was mostly the lunch duty, the ticket taking, clock keeping at just little things here and there. Some, the bigger schools, of course, had most of the what was paid to us in error. So our Active Payroll would create the refunds for those.
Director Graham? Madam Chair, if I could ask a question of Director Graham.
Yes.
When these estimated contributions are owed to TRS or have to be refunded to PERS, what is the process? Do we just cut them a check, or they cut us a check, or what happens?
So back and forth between the 2 retirement systems, that happens with the inter-unit journal. And we set up, if it's coming in to TRS, we set up a buyback in our system for the reported an error to PERS for each individual. And then the actual change, the money changes hands via inter-unit journal.
Thank you.
Okay, then the other thing I look for is with the working retirees and salary not reported or documents not being submitted. So there wasn't a ton of working retirees that weren't being reported to the retirement system, their wages and contributions. Of course, there's quite a few that didn't fill out the proper paperwork. I'm finding that more with the ones I'm doing now than what I had last year. But, and then the other thing was with the independent contractors. I think there were 2 independent contractors that were working retirees that the employer had no idea that they were actually retired with the system. So they, had to pay those contributions back to us. So that, that contributions that were pretty much, that was only like $1,983.66. So what, with the working retirees and any errors in the current fiscal year, I just give that information to Nolan, and they do the adjustments right there for the employer's next payroll.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Ms. Fish, I'm wondering, are these salaries not reported? Are these from little districts, or are they from districts who have full-time clerks who should have caught this stuff?
It's a combination of, I did a lot, just because it was my first year, I did a lot more smaller schools last year. I did, I think the list is on the back. Helena was a big one.
Helena's the big one, yeah.
Helena and Laurel. So yes, it is stuff that the clerk should have caught. Especially the substituting, but, and most of the big errors did come from the larger schools.
All right, thank you.
Welcome. So totally from those 16 it looks like, just with our estimate, using that 19.91% just for all of them, it looks like there was about $106,874.16 in contributions that will be paid into the teacher's retirement system. And I have actually, I think there were a couple of schools who found issues. Let's see, this was 22, so they went back in their own payroll because they didn't realize that they were making all these mistakes and submitted all of their errors that they found for 23. And we got those updated and fixed already. And this year I have had, I think, 4 clerks in the last 2 days call and that I audited last year, call and say, oh my gosh, how do I report this coach? How am I gonna report this coaching service that they're just a substitute? So that was, that's good that they're realizing. And as far as the service credit, that was the biggest thing, is they're reporting these coaches with 1 hour. So it's, or they're not reporting the service credit at all for part-time employees. If they're just substituting or they're like an aide or not a full-time employee, they're not reporting the service for coaching also. All schools but one reported the salary. But, so that was the biggest error I found with it, just the plain old service credit being reported wrong. So that's a whole education. And I do send along, Janelle had given me a cheat sheet that they use on how to calculate the service credit for non-full-time teachers. So I've gone through that with a few of the clerks already. But I, of course, tell them, give me a call when you're doing your first one and we'll just walk through it together and we'll make sure it's correct.
Awesome.
So those were mostly the errors that I had found. This year I've got 30 schools on my list, 31, plus I'm finishing up the OPI from last year. And let's see, I finished, I think, 4 already this year. And one of them didn't realize that substitutes were supposed to be reported after they, so we're working with them on that. But for the first year, that is just a summary of what I have found.
Thank you so much. Great information.
I agree, Madam Chair. I think this is the reason that the auditor is so important to the process, the training especially.
Well, and the school districts have to be grateful for that because honestly, there's so many things to know. I can't even imagine. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you. All right, so should we do our break?
Can we talk
yes,
about this
we were
just
gonna
for a
do one
second
more. Yes.
longer? Members of the board, this was our sort of first annual auditor report. Certainly it makes sense to look at this, I think, on an annual basis. Just make sure everybody agrees with that. And,
Yes.
We'll proceed that way.
Yeah, we appreciate that. It's just really good information for us.
Madam Chair and Director Graham, may I ask one quick question?
Yes.
Maybe this is directed at Chris. Is there a way in the audit process to identify when it appears that the result of the audit in terms of underpayment is simply human error, as opposed to the possibility, maybe the unlikely possibility, that some of these are intentional? And if that were able to be determined, how would we proceed?
I guess I can answer that question. If it's intentional and if they're not willing to clean it up, it will come before you as the board. You'll know about it.
Okay. So at this point, I'm assuming then that virtually all of these are just attributable to human error.
Yeah, not understanding the requirements or otherwise, yes, human error, yeah. That's exactly what I would say. I mean, and I can tell you, the spreadsheets that Chris, creates for these, Denise and I have sat down and gone through line by line on some of them. She's very organized, they're very well laid out. And I think the communications back and forth between her and the employer are very clear. And so far, it's been a great process. And she's really good at closing the loop on things, you know, following up and making sure that what we identified actually gets fixed and gets paid for.
And I would just have
For
one
that,
comment.
at the very least, it's mildly reassuring to know that it's just human error.
Yeah, and I would just have one comment, Member Chamberlain, in regards to substitute teaching. It's not necessarily a lack of them not understanding or knowing what to do, but also just not knowing the fact that a person is working somewhere else. And hopefully we'll address that issue later on through M-Trust and the new member status, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, since we're brought that topic up, I mean, just so you're all aware, part of the issue with substitute teaching is that in statute, they have the option to opt out of TRS if they're not otherwise already a member for the first 210 hours. And so that creates a lot of problems and confusion for in districts where you have multiple districts close together, like the Billings area or the Helena area. And you have people that are bouncing around from a school in one district to a school in another district, and they have no idea that that person is subbing in more than one district. And the 210 hours can be exceeded, and then all of a sudden, you know, that service not reported that should have been reported to TRS. So we have some ideas of how we might be able to track that as non-contributing employees, and then we can let them know when they hit their 210 hours. But that's going to require some programming changes in our pension administration system.
Thanks again. Appreciate that.
Anything else with public comment? We were going to go through the applications and adjustment or benefit adjustments.
Time for that?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the active and retired staff have been very busy. They processed over 500 applications from April to August. And of course now that process, the summer is over and now it's going through the closeout process of actually re-reviewing those 500 plus applications and getting their benefits finalized. But kind of normal summer for us, not excessive, pretty much what it's been for the last few years. And so, but it's always a busy process in the summertime.
Quick question.
Yes.
Brian and Todd mentioned that we had a actuarial loss stemming from people retiring more quickly than we expected. When was that, and did we kind of talk about it as that happened? You're not seeing it now?
No,
It was-
I mean,
it was a couple years ago, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the norm. I mean, that they can retire at 25 years at any age. Just the average age for this 536 was 60.80. And so just over the year, I guess looking at the actual information from this retirements throughout the year, it's been a little bit, they've been retiring a little bit younger, but.
So that would be during our experience study, we might change our assumption a little bit?
Yeah, if it were enough, sorry to barge in, but if it was enough difference for them to recommend a change to the retirement rate assumption, then that would come forward in our experience study. But I would point out, like, those losses in our valuation, they look big because the scale is so small. But when you look at our total liability, that's almost nothing. I mean, our assumptions are almost dead on,
Okay.
to be honest with you.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions? All right, well, we'll take a break. We're only 5 minutes now, or from where we should be, but ahead of schedule definitely. So we'll come back at 10:15 because the next item on our agenda has the informal review, and that person was planning on being here, I'm assuming. That's the way I looked at it. Yes. Okay, all right. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Dee, are you with us again? We'll wait a few more seconds for Dee. I'm not seeing her yet. We should probably give her that moment to get here. Oh, there she is. There she is.
I'm here.
Thanks, Dee. All right, we're to the point of our meeting where it's an informal review of a membership tier. And I'm gonna let Sean take over. We've got this in our packet. It is behind tab 6. And we've got everything I think that we need, but Sean is gonna summarize some things for us, and then we'll let Mr. Vergara speak on his behalf as well.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, in your packet, there's a very short summary that, Mr. Vergara requested an informal review of our final staff determination. And then I have 2 attachments for you to consider. They were in your packet prior to the meeting, and I can pull them up and just summarize them. The first one is a letter that was sent from TRS to Mr. Vergara on August 31st, where we communicated our final staff determination to him about his membership tier. And I won't go through and read this word for word, but I will point out a couple of items. Primarily under number 5, the issue is Mr. Vergara was a member in 2008. At the end of his service in the 2008-9 school year, he withdrew his contributions with TRS, essentially, canceling his rights as a TRS member, and then came back to work after the 2013 session, and when he came back to work, he was put in Tier 2 membership because that's what how the laws were set up when the legislature passed House Bill 377 creating Tier 2. And I'll just highlight a couple of these. Under number 5, it talks about the 2013 legislature and that 1920 101 33, sorry, it's not highlighting very well. Tier 1 means a person hired or who became a member before July 1, 2013 and who is not withdrawn the member's account balance. That's right in the law. 1920 101 34, Tier 2 member means a person who became a member on or after July 1, 2013, or who after withdrawing the member's account balance became a member again after July 1, 13. And then 1926-03 says a member's withdrawal and refund under this section constitutes forfeiture of the member's credible service and any right to benefit pursuant to that service, terminates their membership in the system, terminates a withdrawn Tier 1 member status as a Tier 1 member, so on and so forth. So I provided this to you. I guess maybe the best thing would be is to ask you at this point if you have any questions about the final staff determination. And then once we kind of determine whether there's any questions about what is written in this letter, then we can go to Mr. Vergara's statement and request for your review, and we'll give him an opportunity to make his case, I guess. Denise, did I miss anything? I think we're at a point where if they have questions, we can answer them. It's all laid out in the letter.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would point out is that in number 3, the law at the time that Mr. Vergara withdrew, TRS statute was clear that withdrawal meant a termination of membership in the system.
All right, any board members have any questions before we let Mr. Vergara speak? All right, Mr. Vergara, would you like to unmute yourself and join our meeting?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for your time this morning. Is this just, I don't know your board meeting policy, but is this a closed meeting? Is this open to the public, or are these notes public knowledge?
This meeting is open to the public. This
Okay.
is part of the public.
Okay,
Yes.
do I have a right to close this meeting and go into a private session?
No.
There would have to be a determination, Mr. Vergara, that your rights of individual privacy exceed the public right to know And I don't think that there is a basis for that determination.
Okay. And I guess, you know, my feelings towards this, just to be real honest with you, I would have made that withdrawal if I would have known that would have changed and my life would have taken me back into public education for the state of Montana. At this point, I just feel like, you know, I have earned the right to be a tier 1 member due to my service in Thompson Falls in 2008, 2009. And that's basically, how I feel. I feel like it's a deal of right and wrong, and I feel like I've earned the right to be a tier 1 member due to my service there in 2008, 2009. I did buy back in for about double what I took out at a later date. I'm a believer in the Montana retirement system and Montana public education. I am a servant leader. I have been from day one. My first day in Thompson Falls. I was a football coach there and a PE teacher. The first day there, I met a gentleman by the name of Chad Laws, and we left football practice that night at 7 o'clock, and we went and lumbered wood. We took all of that wood back, and we heated all the homes in the Thompson Falls community for the first 3 weeks. Since then, my public service to the state of Montana and to the kids have included death threats at Laurel High School to me and my family, for informing the local community there that their parents would not be able to watch the games during COVID-19. I also was in the middle of the largest sexual harassment incident in the United States history with the Doc Jensen's case in Miles City, as I was the activities director there and handled that in the utmost professionalism, and served the state great in that case. I also prevented a school shooting this last year at Baker High School. So I feel like, you know, I've more than earned some credit here and some respect. Yeah, that's basically, I wouldn't have taken that out if I would have known. I was extremely poor at the time. I moved to the state of Montana with a credit card and a pickup, and didn't have any money after my 2008-2009 year. I signed a contract for $27,000, and then I ended up going to grad school. I took that money out so I could make it to MSUB in Billings and begin my master's degree in sports management at that time. So that's why I took the money out. And since then, beautiful wife, she taught 8 years for Billings Public Schools. I got a little one who's my miracle child, 5 years old. And we're rocking and rolling. We love public education, love serving kids. And so that's a little bit behind my story, but I wouldn't have taken that out if I would have known. I was surprised. I was assuming I was always a tier 1 level member. And then I was going through a PowerPoint presentation in regards to retirement. I'm a little ways away from retirement and was shocked to learn that I was a tier 2 member. And so that's why I brought this up and wanted to see if I could get my tier 1 membership back.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Do any board members have anything? Mr. Vergara, I would just say that I appreciate you coming in today to to talk to us. I absolutely appreciate everything you've said. As a teacher of 29 years in the state of Montana, I know exactly all of the kinds of things that you go through. However, when I look at our state law, it is as clear as crystal to me that you should have understood. And I deal with, as a union member, I deal with new teachers, I deal with all ages of teachers who sign contracts and do things that they didn't really understand. And ignorance is not bliss. I don't see any way here that we as a teachers retirement board can help you. I think it would be the state legislature that could. Montana law is very clear. Montana code annotated is very clear. When I looked at this, I would love to help you. We all would, but you're not the only one. There would be many, many others. And typically, especially as a board chair, I've been on this board since 2004. I get a lot of people who are like, well, this just isn't fair, and it isn't. And oftentimes I'm sorry that it's not fair, but I don't really see a way that I think that we can help you, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, we've seen lots of situations where we would really like to make an exception, where it's like, oh my gosh, and for this situation, I would probably say, yeah, look at all the things this gentleman has done for our state and for the kids in our state. Let's just scooch them over into that other tier. Unfortunately, we can't do that because of the precedent that it sets, I think.
Madam Chair, I'd like to add my 2 cents. I made a decision about 20 years ago that I regretted for a long time, in that I took a reduced benefit. And now that I'm this old, I wish that I hadn't taken a reduced benefit. We can't go back in time and history. We make our choices, and the legislature comes to town and makes the laws, and we as a board simply cannot make a new set of laws pertaining to you or me or anyone else. We make our choices, and I'm sorry to say that you're going to have to live with them.
Mr. Vergara, I also have empathy for your situation. I would encourage you not to have this decision that we are required to make, such as to not set a precedent, cause you any bitterness. Remember, you have a beautiful wife and a miracle child. You're a good teacher and a good coach. I'm really sorry this occurred for you, but the law is very clear.
And part of this is that this is an action item, Mr. Vergara, so I'm gonna call for a motion. One of the board members will make a motion, we'll second that and we'll vote. So I would like to call a motion on Mr. Vergara's request.
Madam Chair, I move that we not grant Mr. Vergara's request due to our following state law.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of Mrs. Brown's motion, Member Brown's motion, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. The motion passes.
So, go ahead.
Mr. Vergara, this is Denise Pizzini. I'm legal counsel for the retirement system. I just want to make sure you understand that the board's concurrence with the staff determination is subject, of course, to your right to request a contested case hearing in this matter. We will send you a letter in the next few days that outlines those rights for you. Okay?
Yep, thank you.
All right. So if we're moving ahead in our agenda, we have already done the internal auditor report, and now we're on to our strategic planning. Thank you for coming over a little bit early. We got you just a bit, and we thought we were ahead of time, and we all like to get out of town. Well, we all do.
Anything I can do to help. So thanks for having me back. So I think at this point, and Executive Director Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, we just need to kind of review it and formally adopt the plan. So, Chair Elliott, I don't know if we want to walk through the whole thing. I think everybody's had a chance to look at it, so.
We were all part of the drafting of it.
Yes.
We're very much in, we know that this guides where we're at, and yes.
So I guess maybe I would just ask if anybody has any comments, changes, areas that don't make sense, and I'd open the door wide open. If you don't like the colors, fonts, anything like that, we can fix any and all of that. So just want to give everybody an opportunity to maybe comment on the plan itself. We've got and we kind of followed a similar format as previous plans. So the introduction kind of walks us through a recap of what we did. the background is the history of TRS's strategic planning efforts, and I think that's nice just to present that with each plan so people could see this has been an ongoing effort. Mission, vision, principles were all affirmed. Our operational environmental assessment, I think, is a nice bit of information for everybody that's reviewing the plan to kind of see what the board considered. I did notice we've got some page break issues, so I'll address those in the final draft. And then if we look at page 10, these were just some of the contemporary issues and surveys that we looked at, the regulatory issues, ASOP, some of the state legislation, and then the input we got from our stakeholders and partners, from staff, and then from board members. So just skipping ahead to page 12, what we have here is the organizational goals and objectives. One of the things I just wanted to point out is some of the objectives listed here may not necessarily be on the commitment worksheet just because they're ongoing, regular requirements of TRS, so not everything there is going to be programmed out on the commitment worksheet, but they are still objectives that we have to meet every year. So for example, like on the sustain a high performance work culture, the GFOA Certificate of Achievement is something we're going to shoot for every year, so that wasn't necessarily called out in the commitment worksheet because that's just going to be an ongoing responsibility. And then probably the big thing that the board hopefully had a chance to look at was just the strategic planning commitment worksheet. We got your input on that, and then Sean and the staff kind of thoughtfully reviewed that. We proposed a few target dates and deadlines. I think most of the stuff that wasn't programmed out at our last strategic planning meeting will fall on page 19 on the back there. So some of the things about promoting the system as a benefit, hiring the FT, additional FT communication professional. We've targeted that for the spring of 2024. Probably going to start that process as soon as we get board approval, I assume.
Did it today.
Great. So you're right on top of it. And then, we'll continue some of the other research and everything. So pretty much everything's filled in. I'll quit talking and just see if anybody has any comments or thoughts, and then we can wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I add just a little bit? Just so the board understands the process, after our August meeting, I had notes that I had written for things the board discussed, as well as did Jim. Jim went through the strategic plan draft that we had from August, and in track changes, he made updates. And he had some comments and questions for me, and all of the things that we discussed at our August meeting were incorporated to this plan. And then the other thing I would add is our commitment worksheet is something we review at every single board meeting. And any one of those board meetings, if there's something that we don't currently have on there as a goal or objective that has an outcome that we want to see happen in the next year or two, we can certainly add that, or we could decide there's no way we're going to get to one of these, or this is no longer a priority. We could always take something off of this at a future date. So really, you're adopting today sort of the narrative of our strategic plan that all comes before this commitment worksheet, and then this is our starting point for the next 2 years in regard to the commitment worksheet, I guess is how I would explain it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dee.
I really still like this priority timeline and the responsible party. I think that's a real positive part of this worksheet.
Absolutely.
And I would just comment too that I feel really strongly about this process now that I've seen it go so many times through. I've been part of it from the beginning, but used to about every 5 years, and now it's every other year. And it just, as a member of the personnel committee, it helps me to evaluate Sean. It helps me to know exactly what we're supposed to be doing at board meetings. So it is just a valuable, I feel like we as an organization do better because of it, so.
Okay. So not hearing any changes, I guess then. Great.
No,
All right,
that's
well,
great.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
So do you guys have to like do a motion to formally adopt it, or?
We do, yeah. We need a motion to adopt the 2023 to 2025 Strategic Board Planning Commitment Worksheet.
Madam Chair, do we need to ask for public comment first?
Oh, yes, we do. I don't see anybody in our waiting area or in online though, so that's kind of why I skipped over, but thank you for the reminder.
Yep.
All right. And we had a motion from Dan Trost. Can we have a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of adoption of the strategic planning commitment worksheet indicate by saying aye.
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 And chair votes aye as well. Thank you again for an awesome
Yes,
process.
thank you, everybody,
Your
and
professionalism.
like Chair Elliott said, we'll look closely at this as we do Sean's evaluation, which will be coming up in just a few months.
We don't have to do that.
Jim, give me a call, I got a few things. All right, well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate all of your input, and this process is just great. I really enjoy working with all of you on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. All right, so we'll move ahead. We've already done the application and benefits adjustments, so we're going to jump ahead to the legal counsel's report with Denise.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Not a lot to report as usual for contested case matters. We will send out the letter for Mr. Vergara and outlining his contested case hearing rights. We've mailed a couple of other final staff determinations recently. One's going out the door today. So we've actually had a pretty productive last few weeks or last couple of months for final staff determinations. So far, we have no contested case matters going on right now. So unless.
So it's interesting to me. I mean, I get the process, but in a contested case, they can contest a law that we can't change.
Well, they're gonna have to have a legal basis to do that.
Okay, but you can't just bring something because you want to?
Pretty much any determination we make adverse to a member, an employer even, or whatever, is subject to their right to a contested case matter. We can always file for summary judgment if they don't have a legal basis for challenging the determination, but they have the right to do that, so.
It's interesting, all right.
So that's really all I have to report at this point, for legal matters ongoing.
A large majority of our determinations and the way we work things are either handled a little more informally, just through emails where we communicate the law and either the employer or the member, simply agrees, oh yeah, we screwed up or I did this wrong, and we handle it that way, or we do issue final staff determinations, just like that letter that was in your packet, that are not contested at all. They essentially, submit to the laws we're pointing out, and they correct the error or whatever happened. So there's a lot more of these kinds of things that happen that you never see. You only see the ones where they really disagree with us and they want to plead their case.
I have, I guess, a comment. You had sort of forwarded emails that went back and forth on this, for this situation, and the only thing I'm wondering, and it's probably not possible, but is there a way to sort of soften the initial email just a little bit without putting ourselves in any sort of legal gray area, sort of empathize, apologize, and then state the situation and the rules? Would that be possible, or do we need to be like hard and strong right out of the gate?
So just so everyone kind of understands what Dan is talking about, I think Mr. Vergara at one point, after he got the initial response from me, went out and he grabbed only 2 of the 4 board members' email addresses, and he started copying them on the email exchanges we were having, where this was a very cut and dried case. I mean,
Yes.
it's very clear what
That
the
is
law
clear.
was. And I did not include the other two board members. I think if I remember right, he had included Dan Trost and Dan Chamberlain. And did not include Dee Brown or Carrie. And I kept it that way on purpose because I certainly didn't want to have a quorum of the board in on this email exchange because, you know, I would have, my preference would have not to have any board members on there, but I also wanted you to be aware that you were getting these emails and you know, and it just kind of is what it is up until we issued the final staff determination. I understand the question you're asking and perhaps, I mean, I would say, yes, I can try to make a better effort to be a little more empathetic. In his case, I mean, the withdrawal form that he signed, it very clearly told him, by signing this form, you're terminating your membership rights with the system. And so there's no, whether I feel bad about it, and at that point, I didn't know any of the circumstances behind it, other than he thought he should be tier 1. So
Yeah.
I can try to be more empathetic.
I mean, sometimes that helps for feelings getting hurt enough to then lawyer up or whatever. Sometimes, I mean, I know but I know there's also the gray area where if you act too empathetic, that feels like a legal opening. So I know it's really a hard area to try to balance. So I totally understand that, but.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dee.
Though I understand exactly the conversation going on here, I think it behooves us as a board to follow the law, which we did. And sometimes soft pedaling is not an answer because that then feels like, oh, well, maybe there is some wiggle room, where in fact there is no wiggle room. So I'm a pretty hard liner when it comes to the law.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Dan.
I think that both Member Brown and Member Trost are making valid points. I think what Member Trost is attempting to say is that we can offer a bit of empathy in our language by saying something like, we're very sorry that you find yourself in this position. However, and then we make the strong legal case that we are not capable of changing a precedent. And so both Member Trost and Member Brown's objectives can be met. And frankly, I thought the language that Director Graham used was very legally appropriate. I agree with Member Trost. There might have been a way in the early portion of that letter to soften the blow just a bit. I really think we're cutting hairs here a bit, however, because each person that we are going to have this relationship with is going to react differently.
Very true. Yep. No, I didn't find any fault with anything that happened. I just was wondering if in this particular case, if it would have maybe ended more quickly because I feel like there was some aspect of what was happening here that just, he wanted some recognition and some respect for what he's gone through, and maybe like, yeah, we're sorry this happened. So.
Yeah. Well, frankly, when I got the letter, I was tempted to ask Director Graham if he thought it would be helpful. I may have even actually said this to him, if I were to call the gentleman and allow him to give me some feedback. I think Director Graham thought that wouldn't be prudent. So we opted not to do that.
And it happens to me a lot in things, just because I'm in the school system, people will grab me and say this, and that, and I just listen. Honestly, half the time I would like to say, I'm sorry that you don't read your contract.
Yeah.
But it's really hard. I know that, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful of our, member there. It's so frustrating because it's just.
And Madam Chair and board members, let me just throw in, keep in mind as well, that in this process, you will end up being, as a board, the finders of fact and concluders of law in a contested case matter, which means you should not, get overly familiar with the parties to the case, and do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I understand, Member Chamberlain, your thought that you might be able to, bring some personal touch to the process, but that really, should not happen.
Agreed.
Makes sense.
All right. So we will move forward to our last, or not our last, but another action item for the election of chair and vice chair. Before we get going though, I would like to ask, where are we standing with new members?
Yeah.
So I unfortunately cannot speak for the GM4 administration, but I do know that they have, for a fact, I know that they have several candidates, one of which went to them upon the recommendation of Dr. Watson, who's the director of SAM. And then I know they have some others, they just have not made the appointments yet. So as of right now, we're still down 2 board members. I suspect at some point they'll get appointed. So as you work your way through this, it may be a good idea to leave a couple of those that are vacant when you get to the committee appointments, and then assign those members once they are appointed to the board. Or
Otherwise, we all have to be on all 3 committees.
correct, yeah, otherwise you're, yeah, so, but I don't have an update. I've made a lot of different contacts with the governor's office. I know they're aware of it. It's just timing for them hasn't worked out to where they've done the appointment.
Director Graham, would it be prudent for us to postpone this section until our November meeting, hoping that we have at least one more person on the board?
I don't see why not. I don't think, I mean, I think we annually do this. There's no reason why we couldn't push it back a meeting, no legal reason, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think that would be fine.
Can you remind me who's on the committees now? I think I'm on the legislation committee with.
Yeah, so in your packet right behind tab 11. So right now on the budget and audit committee is Dan Chamberlain, and the other seat is vacant. It was Sarah. On the legislation and litigation committee, it's Dan Trost and Dee Brown. So that one is fully staffed. And then the personnel and policy committee was Carrie Elliott and Scott Doves, yes, and of course Scott's no longer on the board. And I think we may potentially, maybe another idea would be to elect your chair and vice chair and just save the committees until the next meeting.
Do that. Are you concerned that we might have personnel or budget issues that need to be addressed between now and the next meeting, and you'll just have a committee of 1? Is that an issue?
I'm not concerned of that. I guess if something rises to the level where, I think we need more than one board member's input on it, it would go in front of the whole board anyway.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, personally, I don't see a reason to postpone it. We could just do it and leave some vacancies, but that's just my opinion. Doesn't matter either way. I can't imagine a brand new board member wanting to be the chair or the vice chair, but maybe.
Well, they're not even eligible to be chair or vice chair because they have to be on the board for at least a year. So one of you, the 4 of you will be the chair and the vice chair.
Okay.
You can't just throw somebody under the bus.
No.
Well, I think Carrie is doing a fantastic job as chair, and I nominate that she take it another year.
I second
Madam
that.
Chair, could we do
Yes.
I move that by acclamation, we retain our chair and vice chair.
We have no
We
vice
don't
chair.
have a vice chair right now, so
Oh.
we need one. It was Sarah,
Right.
but Dan was back before. Dan Chamberlain, you were before Sarah, weren't you?
I
No?
don't know. Not sure.
Oh,
I think it was Scott.
oh, it was
I think it was
Scott.
Scott, yeah.
Okay.
It was
All right.
Scott, yep.
You are always here, so it's not
I've
our
always
job.
been here, yeah. Who wants to be vice chair? Raise your hand.
I can see
Dan,
you
how about
guys.
it?
Which Dan?
Oh, come on, Dee.
Either one.
Either one.
Either one.
Either one.
Any Dan will work. Dan, you want to do it?
I would be happy to do it if nobody else volunteers.
We would appreciate that very much. You'd be great at that.
All right.
All right. So it looks as though we just are gonna need a motion for that. And then, like you said, Dee, let's do that. I would, in my opinion, do the committee assignments by acclamation for now until we know. And then at least we have that set and Sean knows who to call. And, yeah, we'll just help things if something comes up.
All right, sounds good.
All right, we just need a motion.
I move to reelect Carrie as chair and Dan Chamberlain as vice chair.
I second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded for the election of the chair and the vice chair as Carrie and Dan Chamberlain. All those in, any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, and then the motion passes. Also the committee appointments, we also need a motion for that.
I move that we table that until the November meeting, hoping for enough board members to fully staff those.
Okay.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to table the committee appointments. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye as well. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, we are to the part on our board meeting that is a closed meeting for disability applications. We will open the board meeting back up, and this is an action item on our application for disability.
I move that we just, go ahead.
You can go down.
I move that we disapprove Ms. Gray's request for disability benefits.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye as well. Motion passes. All right. So, well, our last time for public comment, but seeing that we don't have any public, I will take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
I second it. Very good, Chair. We went through this quickly.
Yeah, Sean and I both thought it would go longer than this, so we're great. We'll see you, Dee, in San Diego.
Yes.
And all those in favor of adjournment indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.